Bills, second reading. Projet de loi, deuxième lecture. Numéro 1.
Number 1, Bill C-45.
C-45.
8, Senator Wu. Senator Wu.
Thank you, Your Honor. Honourable Senators, I would like to join the debate on C-45, an act respecting cannabis, and to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, Criminal Code, and other acts. I thank colleagues who have spoken before me. Many of the issues on my mind have already been raised. There is no need for repetition. Instead, I want to build on what has already been said and to offer specific suggestions for more detailed investigation at the committee stage of our deliberation. Let me say, first of all, that I agree with the stated intention of the bill, which is to reduce the harm that is currently being done to consumers of cannabis, especially youth, because of the uncontrolled nature of cannabis production and sales in this country. As an illegal product, cannabis sales operate in the shadows and are run by criminal networks. The shadows are much larger than many of us would like to admit, and much as we like, shadows cannot be wished away. The decades-long war on drugs is simply not working. Colleagues, I also agree with the stated public health approach that we heard ministers talk about when they attended the Committee of the Whole here in the Senate last week. I have no doubt that they are sincere in taking this approach, but I worry that the rhetoric is not consistent with the actual measures in the bill, and that rhetoric notwithstanding, our youth are hearing or choosing to hear a different message. Advocates of legalization argue that the incidence of cannabis use will not increase after the product becomes lawful. They cite the example of Colorado, Oregon, and Washington State, which may or may not be relevant for Canada as a whole. I am not as confident as they are. The fact is that Canada already has one of the highest rates of cannabis use among youth, so there must be something unique about the social and political context of Canada, or parts of Canada, that has resulted in such high rates. We cannot be sure that legalization will not compound the particularities of the Canadian context, leading to even higher use of marijuana among youth. For some, higher rates of cannabis use are not worrying. After all, it has been said often that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol. If one can drink responsibly, one should also be able to talk responsibly, or so the argument goes. Hence, having more Canadians consume cannabis is not seen to be a problem as long as they consume it responsibly. Perhaps, but for all the rhetoric of responsible drinking, the reality is that alcohol consumption is responsible for a wide range of health problems and costs. According to the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, alcohol consumption accounts for $7.1 billion in lost productivity owing to illness and premature death, $3.3 billion in direct health care costs, and $3.1 billion in enforcement costs. In truth, we don't know what the long-term health effects of cannabis consumption are and what their costs will amount to. They may be relatively benign or not. Legalization will allow for proper research to be conducted on this topic. In the meantime, we are operating on a certain amount of faith, perhaps even wishful thinking. What we do know is that cannabis, in particular the compound tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is harmful to the developing brain at least up to the age of 25. THC is a neurotoxin, and it damages neurons needed to develop vital brain circuits. THC affects the body's endocannabinoid system, which is critically important for organ and brain development. Studies have shown that long-term use of cannabis results in abnormal brain structure and function in areas rich in endocannabinoid receptors. There's even evidence that THC-induced changes in brain structure and function may be inherited by subsequent generations through a process known as epigenetic modification. Colleagues, given what we know about the serious harm to developing brains up till age 25, why is the age limit for cannabis consumption set at 18, or in the case of some provinces, at age 19? The chosen age limit in the proposed bill is based on a belief that it would be counterproductive to set a higher age limit. There are two variants to this argument, at least two. I'm aware of two. There may be others. The first is that having an age restriction on cannabis that is different from the age limit for alcohol sends a confusing message to young people. Why is it okay to consume alcohol at 18 or 19? Alcohol, by the way, is said to be more dangerous, more harmful than cannabis. Why is it okay to consume that product at age 18 or 19, but not be able to consume cannabis at that same age? Cannabis being deemed a less harmful product. Well, to my mind, having a different age limit would in fact be an excellent way to underscore the special dangers posed by cannabis to the developing brains of young people. There is nothing magical about the so-called age of maturity, especially not if the brain is in fact not mature until age 25. Having a different age limit for alcohol and cannabis is not inconsistent. On the contrary, it is entirely consistent with a science-based approach to regulation and can be used as a valuable teaching moment for parents, educators, and peers alike. The second argument I've heard against the higher age limit is more persuasive. It is that a higher age limit would not prevent youth between the age of 18 and, say, 21 or 23 or 25 from consuming cannabis, and they will be forced to buy their weed from the black market with all of the risks associated with unregulated products and the involvement of criminal networks. This is, of course, not unlike the problem of underage consumption of alcohol, albeit at a lower age limit. How do underage youth get access to alcohol? Well, mostly through adults who allow alcohol products to inadvertently fall in the hands of young people, or who purchase alcohol on behalf of young people in contravention of the law. I'm not an expert on underage consumption of alcohol, but my impression is that the product they get access to is via legal distribution channels rather than the black market. Can we not expect that a similar practice will take place in the case of underage consumption of cannabis? Now, it will be illegal, of course, for an adult to purchase cannabis for an underage person, as it would be for an adult to purchase alcohol for an underage person. But if this happens, we can at least have consolation that the product is obtained from a regulated source. I am not naive, though. Underage consumers will also source product from the black market, and they will face the same risks that are present today, including very high THC content, contaminated products, interaction with criminal actors, and of course the stigma of a criminal record if they are caught and convicted. How much of a role the black market plays in supplying underage consumers will depend partly on how widely available legal marijuana is and the price at which it is sold. This is why we should be paying as much attention to the retail, distribution, and licensing plans of provinces as we are to the question of age limits. Colleagues, the uncomfortable logic of legalization is that the policy will only succeed in significantly reducing the black market if legal, regulated marijuana is widely available across the country and sold at a competitive price. The big unknown is what would in fact happen if the age limit for cannabis consumption is raised to 21, 23, or even 25. Let me paint a scenario. Young people under the age limit would without doubt still access cannabis as they are doing today, but I suspect that many of them would be getting legal, regulated product, albeit illegally. To the extent that this group would otherwise be getting product from illegal, unregulated sources, would this alternative, the scenario I've painted, not be considered a form of harm reduction? Now, there would still be those who buy from the black market and put themselves at higher risk of consuming contaminated product. We cannot be blasé about this group, but the danger in this scenario is, in fact, what we currently experience under the status quo. There is an upside, though, to a higher age limit in my imagination, and the upside is that we will be sending a very clear signal about the special risks of marijuana consumption on the developing brain up to the age of 25. If by raising the limit, we delay the first use of cannabis use to the mid-20s, and if in so doing, we end up protecting the brains of thousands of young people, is that not a good policy trade-off? Now, I may be speaking glibly since I am not an expert on the factors driving youth consumption of marijuana. I'm also aware that my scenario is based on many assumptions around economic incentives, criminal network behavior, and most importantly, youth psychology. It's been a long time since I was in that age bracket, and I'm humble enough to recognize that I may be thinking very differently from the way youth look at cannabis use and cannabis consumption. Again, these are topics I have limited knowledge of, but I am compelled to ask the question, should we not consider more of a precautionary approach to the sweeping legislation before us? Which brings me back to my original point. If marijuana is widely available and the age limit is set at 18 or 19, the temptation will be high for youth up to age 25 to take up the drug. And they will be doing so at some risk to their developing brains. Hence, I am respectfully requesting that the Social Affairs Committee, which I hope will soon receive this bill for in-depth study, to apply an extra dose of unimpaired second thought to the question of the age limit. I understand the bill's logic of not setting an age limit that is too high, and may well be persuaded that this approach is the best one when all factors are considered. But we owe it to our youth and to the generations to follow to revisit this question, especially when we have heard the clear and unequivocal advice of physician groups calling for an age limit between 21 and 25. They have given us an evidence-based approach to policy using their lens of medical science. This is not the only lens with which to formulate policy, but it is a very important one. I look forward to witness testimony on these questions during the committee hearings.
Senator Stuart Olson, question?
Take a question, Senator.
Yes, with pleasure.
Thank you. I'm interested in the statistic that has been widely disseminated in the fact that marijuana smoking among youth is the highest in the world. Where did that come from? I'm not sure. And seeing as I see the stories in the news today about the government hiring a lot of inspectors and they're going to check sewage for the amount of marijuana use, I just don't know where we get that statistic.
Senator Wu.
Thank you, Senator. I'm afraid I can't give you the source, but we've all heard the statistic. There are others in this chamber who know it. I'm taking it as a given, and as you heard from my speech, using it as one of the reasons why we should be cautious about the idea that legalization will not lead to greater use. There's something happening in our society that has led to the higher use. I'm not judging it, but it is perhaps particular to Canada, and if legalization will increase the incidence of cannabis use, that should be something that weighs in our thinking on this piece of legislation.
Senator Housakis.
Colleagues, I think we have to be very careful when we get certain statistic sources that come from a government that needs to support a narrative when they're trying to put legislation through, but because the reality of the matter is the source of that information seems to always be government ministers, and some senators perpetuate that information. But my question is going back to your speech in regards to how youth acquire alcohol. And your speech was a very astute speech, actually. And I share the same concerns as you do about the effect this legislation is going to have on young people and, of course, the future of our country, because young people are the essence of our future. So I've worked with a number of organizations, both in Montreal and across the country, that deal with teenage youth alcoholism. And you're absolutely right. One of the ways that young people acquire alcohol is they get irresponsible adults to buy it for them. But the largest number, there's a huge percentage of addicted teenagers in regards to alcoholism that get access to alcohol from home, from the liquor cabinet. And they develop that addiction at the age of 13, 14, 15, or they get it from the grandpa's liquor cabinet. So this piece of legislation, as we all know, is allowing for, I think it's 4 marijuana plants per household in the country. And you know what? You can put a lock on a liquor cabinet, you can do all kinds of things, but you can't obviously guarantee that you're going to have parents in this country being responsible for how their youth develop. And you've pointed out in your speech, and I think all of us share this, that there's tremendous ramifications from people smoking marijuana, especially teenagers till the age of 25. And doesn't this chamber find it completely irresponsible to have young kids as young as 10 and 12 and 14 having access to marijuana pots and a grinder, probably, because if a parent is growing a marijuana pot at home, he probably knows how to grind it, knows how to roll it, knows how to toke it. So that's my question.
Senator Wu.
Thank you, Senator Sarkos. I hope the chamber doesn't object if I can answer the previous question to say that we have a statistic from UNICEF, as it turns out, on the high incidence of Canadian youth consuming cannabis. I agree with much you said. The slant that I would give is slightly different, though, which is that many of the challenges we face currently with youth consumption of cannabis are real problems today. They're happening now, and they are a function of the criminalization and the fact that the drug market is illegal, forcing young people who have some, to me, unknown desire to experiment and want to take drugs by going to the black market and getting product which unquestionably is more dangerous than what would be available through a regulated market. So I think I share much of your concern, and what I'm trying to focus on here is whether it's possible for us to think of a higher age limit that would in effect be harm reducing for young people who are going to consume cannabis one way or the other, but who can at least get it from safer sources, and at the same time for us as a society to send a message to all Canadians that consumption of cannabis below the age of 25 is particularly hazardous to your brain.
Senator Housakis.
So, Senator Wu, if I understand you correctly, you'd be open, I guess, to suggesting some of our colleagues, especially when they study this further, to upping the age limit. And I was wondering if you can give us what that number would be. I've heard a number of medical experts and providers of healthcare, and Senator O had an excellent panel here in the Senate a couple of weeks ago, and a number of our colleagues attended it. And I think every single doctor said up until the age of 25, the brain is developing. So would that be the magic number?
Senator Wu.
Those event, which was terrific, by the way, and in fact, what I was surprised to hear from the experts was that they wanted the age limit to stay. These particular specialists from the pediatric specialists of Canada, I think I even asked the question, why would you not have a higher age limit? Because the CMA has said 21 and the College of Family Physicians has said 25, and others have said something in between. But the pediatric experts wanted it to stay at the same age limit as alcohol because they thought there would be a contradiction. And I addressed that issue in my speech. Yes, there is a contradiction, but at the same time, it's a teaching moment. Possibly it will tell people, look, you need to really pay attention. The point is this. At the end of my speech, I think I said it clearly enough, but let me make it very crystal clear. I am very persuaded by the evidence from medical science that the brain is developing to 25, and we should do everything we can to prevent cannabis getting into the hands of youth below the age of 25. But I don't understand enough about economic incentives and child psychology and the way black markets work in order to say that an age limit of 21 or 23 or 25 will in fact be more harm reducing than an age limit of 19. That's why I'm asking the committee to pay fresh attention to this question, looking at medical science, which has given us a clear lens on the issue, but asking also for experts on addiction reduction, on anti-addiction campaigns, on the way black markets work, on the way pricing formulas work, to see if in fact raising the age limit is the best harm reduction strategy. I keep an open mind on this question.
Senator Richards. Sorry, Senator Barrows, I have a list of senators. You're on the list, okay? But Senator Richards, you're next. Senator Richards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Senator Wu, I grew up in a place where marijuana wasn't separate from drinking. It was a companion drug to drinking. And you did one and you did the other. And one exacerbated the other. So I don't think legalization is going to really cure that. I don't think it's going to. As a matter of fact, most of the people that are arguing for this bill start off by arguing against it, by saying what trouble marijuana, hashish is, and then say, but because of that, we need to legalize it. But I'm not really sure if that's going to do it. So, but most of the people I know who toked also drank. And it became not only a gateway drug, but a combination drug, which caused all kinds of problems. And I don't think legalizing it is really going to solve that. So, I mean, that's my question.
Senator Wu.
Well, it was a little bit more of a statement, but I'll just say that those who drink alcohol and smoke marijuana, as a companion, will do it, with or without legalization. It's widely available, and we have to ask if that is preferable to a situation where a legal product with controlled amounts of THC and presumably no pesticides and other contaminants would be a better option. Again, it's about harm reduction, and it's hard to wrap your mind around harm reduction because you start with the premise of harm. There is harm, but there is harm out there. And we cannot be blasé about the fact that people are being harmed by getting drugs with or without alcohol from the black market and being hurt. And if there's a way we can reduce that harm through legalization, I believe that's a right approach.
Senator Richards.
One more thing. It's the reason I say it's a companion drug, which it is to booze, and causes all kinds of problems on the road and off and at work, is because if you legalize it, and I'm sure the bill's going to go through, but if you legalize it, it makes it much more available to those who use it as a companion drug. That's the essence of my question. That's the essence of my problem. How do you alleviate that dual addiction or dual use in kids that are going to be, a lot of them, underage because they start drinking underage. And so they're going to start using marijuana underage, and it's going to be given to them.
Question. I'm not sure it's correct that it will be, let me put it differently. I'm not sure that those who are already inclined to consume alcohol together with or in companion with marijuana will find it any less difficult to get without legalization. They can access the product quite easily already, I believe, and they're accessing product that is typically much more dangerous because of high THC and contaminants and so on. At the very least, and again, it's all about harm reduction, if they have to do this, I would much rather they get a product that is controlled and that they understand quite clearly what they are getting. But your point concerning alcohol, the way youth think about alcohol and cannabis is an important one which I tried to discuss in my speech. And that is the belief among youth that the risks of consuming alcohol and cannabis at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21 are more or less the same if we set the age limit at the same age. I mean, that stands to reason. In fact, youth are being told that alcohol is actually more dangerous than cannabis, so by implication, cannabis is more safe. And if we do have the age limit of 18 and 19, we do, I fear, send a message that is contrary to what doctors are telling us about the developing brain and the need to protect the developing brain till the age of 25. Yeah.
Honourable Senators, it's now 4 o'clock. Senator Wu will have the balance of his time tomorrow if he wishes to take it to answer more questions. And I will inform senators that I do have a list of senators who wish to ask questions. But again, it will be entirely up to Senator Wu whether or not he wishes to take the balance of his time tomorrow. It now being 4 o'clock, pursuant to the order adopted on February the 4th, 2016, I declare the Senate adjourned to Thursday, February 15, 2018 at 1:30 p.m. The Senate so decreeing.